With the president's decision made and millions of lives on the line, the two most powerful countries in the world stared each other down at point-blank range.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we'll be looking at the most significant 10-year spans throughout all of human history.
They may think this is a young general, an upstart, a child, a boy. He's a force to be reckoned with.
Alexander!
Number 10, the 1450s. Starting off, it's the last decade of the medieval period. 1453 marked the end of the 100 Years' War, stabilizing France and England, allowing them to focus on exploration and technological advancement.
In July 1453, the English were overwhelmed and defeated at the Battle of Castillon in Gascony. Bordeaux fell a second time into French hands, this time for good. And the 100 Years' War effectively drew to a close.
The printing press also came into prominence, revolutionizing how we spread information. Alongside this, the Renaissance gained significant momentum, encouraging major artistic and scientific developments. Perhaps most important, 1453 also saw the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Empire.
In fact, here in the East, the Christian Roman Empire lasted right up to 1453, when the Ottomans conquered Byzantium.
It was the Roman capital for almost 11 centuries, even longer than Rome itself. This event ended the medieval era, ushering in an age of exploration. Without Roman trade routes to Asia, Columbus would never have sailed west for India and might never have discovered the New World.
Believing himself to be in the Far East, Columbus calls the islands the Indies. In fact, he is on the edge of a new continent, the Americas.
Number 9, the 310s. The 310s were the first time Christianity became a mainstream religion.
Constantine played every game in the book. He was an extremely ambitious person, and there was no avenue to power that he was going to leave open.
In York 306, Constantine the Great was proclaimed Roman emperor, and his rule would be arguably the most important of all Roman emperors. Most importantly, he converted to and decriminalized Christianity, making it Europe's primary religion for the foreseeable future. Constantine also unified a divided and fractured empire and founded Constantinople.
After Constantine conquered the entire empire, he wanted to create a brand new city in his own name. And he did, Constantinople. He chose a strategic location halfway between the most important frontiers, and he deliberately chose to create a new city that would have no association with his pagan predecessors.
This shifted the empire's capital, signifying the end of Rome's importance as a city. The empire's primary culture then became Greek rather than Italian, and because of him, the Eastern Roman Empire long outlasted its Western counterpart by almost 1,000 years.
Constantine was tremendously successful as an emperor, tremendously successful as a military leader. This was a man who clawed his way into power using raw ambition, and at every turn, he used that same ambition in order to win the day.
Number 8, 1990s. The last decade of the 20th century was an interesting one, packed with historical significance. In 1991, the Soviet Union fell, ending the Cold War and bringing democracy to Eastern Europe.
On the 21st of December 1991, the document that ends the Cold War is signed. The Alma-Ata Protocol.
The latest crisis, the signing of an historic agreement between the three mighty republics, Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, effectively marked the formal death of the USSR.
In 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president, signaling the end of apartheid. This was a major step forward for the global struggle for racial equality, and its effects are still felt today.
In May 1994, Nelson Mandela, the man white South Africa had imprisoned for nearly 30 years, was sworn in as the country's first black president. Through his dignified and courageous leadership, the African National Congress had broken the stranglehold of apartheid and transformed South Africa into a multiracial democracy.
The internet and mobile phones became easily accessible to the public, setting the stage for the smartphone revolution. Countless influential pieces of music, movies, and television also emerged, which had lasting impacts on pop culture. Number 7, the 1960s. The swinging 60s were an amazing decade for human achievements. Not only did we land on the moon, but the civil rights movement abolished legal segregation in the United States.
The country was at the crest of a movement that would cascade into the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Called a second emancipation by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Civil Rights Act ended segregation in all public places and ended employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s landmark I Have a Dream speech will forever be remembered for its enduring impact on humanity. Women's and LGBTQ+ rights movements also hit their stride, and the counterculture movement blossomed. There was revolutionary music with artists such as Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, and Bob Dylan defining the era.
John is in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government.
Unfortunately, the Cold War and the Vietnam War escalated heavily, with the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. It was a period of profound change and upheaval, which laid substantial groundwork for future generations.
Let no one doubt that this is a difficult and dangerous effort on which we have set out. Many months of sacrifice and self-discipline lie ahead, months in which both our patience and our will be tested.
Number 6, the 1770s. Barely 3 months into the 1770s, British soldiers killed 5 civilians in Boston in an event called the Boston Massacre.
So for the first time, real blood has been shed. I mean, there have been fistfights before, knocked heads, but now there's an actual martyr.
5 years later, the American Revolutionary War began, leading to the birth of the United States. The struggle for American independence had far-reaching implications, setting an impressive precedent for other colonies seeking independence.
The question is no longer whether there shall be independence, but when.
One of the most important documents in history, the Declaration of Independence, was signed in 1776. It emphasized individual rights and shaped America for centuries to come. It majorly influenced the French Revolution, with France being inspired by America's emphasis on liberty, equality, and democracy.
At the time, nobody knew where they were going, and they certainly didn't know how everything would turn out. But without intending it, they came up with the most revolutionary idea of the modern world, the idea that without kings and noblemen, ordinary people could govern themselves.
Number 5, the 1790s. The French Revolution kicked off in 1789 due to a complex combination of societal, political, and economic factors.
The revolutionaries had challenged the might and arrogance of the French court in Versailles. They'd executed their king and created a republic, whose watchwords were liberty, equality, and the rights of man. A government whose sovereignty was based in the people.
King Louis XVI was notoriously indecisive, and the ruling nobility opposed Reformation. Consequently, the French Revolution dominated this decade. The Reign of Terror lasted from 1793 to 94, characterized by frequent mass executions perpetuated by the Jacobin government. It ended in 1799 with Napoleon's coup d'etat setting the stage for his rise to emperor.
The most august Napoleon, Emperor of the French, is crowned and enthroned. Long live the Emperor! Long live the Emperor!
Beyond France, U.S. democracy was solidified, with the Bill of Rights ratified in 1791 and the formation of the first political parties. The Haitian Revolution, history's most successful slave rebellion, also began in 1791. This transformative period was characterized by global movements for independence and change.
Haitian tradition says the slaves of Saint-Domingue planned that night to revolt. They timed their uprising to start on multiple plantations in 2 weeks' time.
Number 4, the 1910s. Many conflicts of the 20th century have their roots in the 1910s, making it a decade of profound global importance.
The First World War is fought on a scale never before seen in the whole of human history.
World War I dominated the decade, involving most major powers across the globe. It introduced trench warfare, chemical weapons, and aerial combat. The Russian Revolution also established the Soviet Union, eventually leading to the Cold War.
In 1917, the Romanov dynasty fell, and Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks had managed to seize power in the Russian Revolution.
Not only the Russian Empire fell, but also the Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, and German empires. The League of Nations, the predecessor to the UN, was established in 1919. It was a tumultuous decade, but it transformed the world and shaped international relations for the remainder of the century.
Out of it comes votes for every citizen, the foundation of modern democracy. It is a war between empires that destroys empires. It is a war in which the old rulers pay scant regard for the lives of ordinary people.
Number 3, the 1860s. This pivotal decade significantly transformed cultures across the globe. The American Civil War dominated the first half, ending with a Union victory, thus abolishing most forms of slavery in the U.S.
You've got almost 4 million people who are enslaved, and there was nothing to prevent Southerners from reestablishing slavery in the South unless this 13th Amendment was issued.
In 1861, Italy was unified for the first time since 476, 1400 years prior. Serfdom was abolished in Russia, initiating a series of social reforms modernizing the empire. In Japan, the Meiji Restoration began, beginning Japan's transformation from a feudalist nation to an imperial power.
Newly installed in power, the emperor was renamed Meiji, or Enlightened Rule. He became the symbol for a new Japan that would transform itself in 40 years, from a country of rice paddies to a modern military and economic power that could stand up to the West.
Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution transformed societies globally, with steel and railroads laying the groundwork for decades of economic growth. It's easy to see this decade played a crucial role in shaping the modern world.
It's about finding out about the stuff of life. That feeds into technological change, new engines, new techniques, canals, tunnels, steamships, factories develop. It's an enormous span where science and technology and industry all go together.
Number 2, 1940s. World War II engulfed most of the world in conflict. It brought with it major military campaigns, technological advancements, and the devastating Holocaust.
January 27, 1945. The Soviet army reaches the Auschwitz concentration camp complex set up by the Nazis in occupied Poland. A crime of monstrous proportions has been perpetrated here.
To this day, the Holocaust remains one of the most horrific atrocities in history. The abhorrent genocide had profound implications following the war and will be remembered forever. The conflict ended with the U.S. dropping the 2 most destructive bombs in history on Japan.
In the ashes of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, Fujita realized that the rubble told a story beyond the tragedy of death and destruction.
These devastated the small nation and highlighted the U.S.'s status as a superpower. It also set the stage for the Cold War, a conflict beginning immediately after World War II. This was a decade of intense upheaval, which ushered in the end of colonialism and shaped the 20th century's geopolitical landscape.
In 1945, a continent emerged from the war bloody but unbowed and full of hope. 4 years later, a new era is beginning, one in which peace and prosperity must live alongside the fear of a nuclear apocalypse.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, the 320s BCE. This decade was defined by the extraordinary conquests of Alexander the Great and the subsequent spread of Hellenistic culture throughout the ancient world.
His conquests had opened the East to a flood of Western and Greek influence, and the contact between cultures was to have a lasting effect on European and Asian civilization.
Alexander's military tactics and strategies set new standards and still influence military thinking today. He established one of the grandest empires in history and founded numerous cities. Alexandria in Egypt became a hub for learning in this period.
He founded Alexandria, modeled on Greek cities. It was a symbol of his passion for establishing his own culture in the conquered territories.
The cultural exchange facilitated by his campaigns laid the foundation for sharing ideas, technologies, and trade across Eurasia. His monumental reign influenced countless historical figures, such as Julius Caesar, Hannibal Barca, Charlemagne, and Napoleon Bonaparte. His legacy left an enduring mark on history, and his influence is still felt today, over 2,300 years later.
After his death, that legend became an inspiration to many who dreamed, but ultimately failed to follow where he had led.
Let us know which decade you would want to live through the most.
For 45 years, the human race lived in the shadow of the most powerful and terrible weapons ever created, in fear of total annihilation.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.